Hello, and welcome to the United States World War I Centennial Commission's Upper Midwest Regional Meeting. I represent the Commission's founding sponsor, the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, as the World War I Centennial Project Manager, and my name is Susan Meningay. It is my great honor to serve as a support for the states which comprise the Upper Midwest region. Those states are Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Ohio, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. Today you'll hear from these state delegates who serve in a leadership role, from guiding and supporting and directing their committee and commission members and volunteers to educating their state's leadership and general public to orient them to the impact World War I continues to have on our world today. These committees are so busy. They support the various commemorative events which pay tribute and honor to those who served in uniform, as well as in their own hometowns and across their respective states. I would like to acknowledge and extend a warm welcome to those who are joining us here at the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, and those who are joining us via the live stream. Should you have questions, an opportunity is provided at the end of each presentation. For those joining us live stream, please use the chat feature. I'm thrilled to now introduce Ken Clark. Joining us is Ken Clark, President and CEO of the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, newly elected Chair of the United States World War I Centennial Commission, Terry Hamby, Vice Chair of the World War I Centennial Commission, Edwin Fountain, and Commissioner Dr. Libby OConnell. Ken, can you join us, please, for a welcome?
So, I can't thank you all enough for being here. Many of you were here for the 100 Cities, 100 Memorials press conference, and if you didn't see that and you're just getting here for this, this is ringing, so we're vibrating. My remarks to you are not very formal right now. My remarks to you are all the work that you all represent in the communities across the 11 states of the Midwest region, and those of you who aren't with us now but joining us via live stream are, in my opinion, represent the very heart of what the World War I Centennial Commission is hoping to achieve and what the Pritzker Military Museum and Library hoped to achieve when it made its $5 million contribution to the Centennial Commission in Washington. So I am very, very excited to see the presentations that were put together today, simply because we're not trying to tell you what to do. We're just trying to be there for you and be a part of what you're doing in a way that's meaningful, and then to watch what's happening and to hear what's happening across the Midwest and across the country. I mean, it's truly I take great heart in it. Just because, as you may, for those of you who were here for the press conference, Terry Hamby's trick of having all the World War I veterans stand up, and nobody stands up, and well, that's the entire point of everything that we're doing through the World War I Centennial Commission's work. So I really welcome you all to the Pritzker Military Museum and Library. This is a place of research, and it is a public space open to anybody who wants to come in. It's open 7 days a week. It's what we do every day, what we do for World War I, we do for World War II, we do for the Vietnam War, we do for the Moro Wars, or some of the other more kind of esoteric conflicts of our American history. But it is a place of research and study, so if you have questions or want to seek resources that we have a lot of them. We have a team of librarians. We have a team of museum professionals that can help you in anything that you are looking for and try to help you connect to the other resources that are across the country. We have played a role in America for in one key area with sequester and then the drawdown and all that stuff that happened with funding military stuff. One of the first lines of defense that went away were many historians, librarians at base military museums, and just it was like the first thing that was cut. You know, all that history stuff. We have remained fully funded during all that time and have really filled in and helped in that vacuum. Not to do the work of those places, but to add an extra set of where multiple sets of hands that kind of research has been going on across the country. So for our friends at the 82nd Airborne Museum or the Maxwell Air Force Base, or for any of those kind of places all across the country, we've been doing that work. So please use this as a resource in addition to also knowing that we are there for you through the Centennial Project. So Susan, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Oh, yes, I'm doing it? Okay. I'd like to now invite Terry Hamby up, who I guess, are you going to ask all the World War I veterans to stand? Okay. Terry, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. And any time that we gather together as a commission, either in the state or in Washington, the one thing we have to do is to thank Colonel Jennifer Pritzker and the Pritzker Military Museum and Library for their being the founding sponsor of this great and noble cause. Without them, it would not be possible. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank Ken, who is focused on 100 cities, 100 memorials, which is a wonderful way that America celebrates their young men and women as they came home from World War I. And that will just accumulate into the National Memorial in Washington, D.C. And then finally, but not last, Susan Meninga for all of the effort. You know, when you get an email from someone every day about an event somewhere in the Midwest, and some people think that's bad, but I'm one that think that's awfully good, because I know it comes from the heart. I know your care, and this wouldn't be possible without Susan being the project manager for the World War I commissions in the regional states. And you guys are really what it's all about. You know, World War I was such a tragic time in the world, and we had discussed it earlier that, and in many times, not only was it a tragedy for Europe, but when President Wilson went to Congress and said that we're going to defend peace and liberty wherever it's challenged, it kind of set the foreign policy for America from then until now. You know, young men and women have been taking up their weapons and their uniforms to go defend liberty wherever it's challenged since then. There was such inventions in equipment, warfighting equipment, that the war created terrible casualties on both sides. Europe lost an entire generation of young men. And doughboys came from the small towns in Tennessee, in Illinois, throughout the U.S., from the reservations in North Dakota to the cities of New York to defend liberty. And they did it willingly. They went abroad to countries that they had never visited for people that they didn't know. And I think that's the American spirit. The Native Americans have a saying that I learned that I like very well. In a good way, we need to celebrate, and not celebrate, but memorialize the sacrifices and the social issues that came out of World War I. Next, I would like to thank you, each one of the state commissions. We have 41, and the Midwest region is the most active. There's a reason for that. And I've participated in events in North Dakota, Indiana, Tennessee, and Kentucky with each of the commissions, and you do such tremendous work. One of our goals are to educate, honor, and commemorate the veterans of World War I. And as someone said earlier, to honor veterans of the past says that we will honor the veterans of today. And our veterans have been forgotten. And through your education programs in each and every one of the states, in communities throughout America, we can bring the knowledge and the desire to want to learn more about the sacrifices of our grandfather's generation. Grandfather, remember that. I'm not that old. But by doing that, we only do that through education. And by doing that, that takes money. And the Federal Commission has worked hard in the last 3 to 5 months, walking the halls of Congress, trying to gain support for this commission in appropriated money so that we can send that back down through the states, through Commissioner and Dr. O'Connell, who runs the education program for all of America for the World War I Centennial Commission. And hopefully when that money comes forward, we can start an intense education program to use it in the most efficient manner possible so that we can get that into our states. We currently, through a grant from the American Legion, have a Train the Teachers program where Libby and a company is helping us train teachers in our public school systems to teach World War I history. And hopefully with money we can expand that program to get that out into the districts. History is all local also, and just like politics. So as all those education programs and everything you're doing are in the states, please try to let us know at our staff in the headquarters in Washington to know that those events are taking place so that we can notify your congressman, and that congressman can come and be there to represent his district at that event and ask for support for this wonderful, wonderful task that we have in front of us. And finally, we have Commissioner, our Vice Chair, Fountain, had the foresight to work hard to get the commission established in the very beginning by Congress through a bill. And he has worked for more than 10 years on a memorial for World War I veterans in the nation's capital. It is the only significant, and I hate to say significant, conflict or World War in America where veterans are not recognized with a national memorial. We need your help. It's an undaunting task to raise enough money to build a memorial when there's so much competition. One man, as we like to say, is about to be recognized with a memorial in Washington, D.C. for $80 million. And I won't mention the gentleman who is an American hero, but here we have 4.7 million Americans who sacrificed so much for us, and we need your help raising the money. And thank you again for all that you do. This will not happen without you, and I just can't thank you enough for how much you do for our World War I doughboys.
I'd like to now introduce Edwin Fountain, Vice Chair of the United States World War I Centennial Commission.
Thank you, Susan. I'm real pleased to be here today because the states embody what I've long said are sort of two key aspects of the commemoration of World War I in this country. The first is, well, three aspects really. The first is, as Terry says, we've been working hard on Capitol Hill for some time now to try to get some appropriated money to help support our operations and to help us help others with their operations. The commission was formed by Congress in 2013, given a very broad, undefined mission, and given no money to execute it with. And so we figured out very early on that our main operating strategy had to be to encourage and hopefully inspire other organizations to undertake commemorative programs and activities and then take credit for it. And we've been pretty successful at that. But reaching out to the states and organizing state commissions and committees around the country has been really the central aspect of that strategy, which is to get the word out, encourage activity at the state and local level, and through that build this great array, this great panoply, a constellation of activity around the country that collectively makes up the national commemoration of World War I. And so to have this regional collection of states that are very actively involved in that, and to be able to come here today and hear what you all are up to is very inspiring and reaffirming for me. The second aspect of it is we've long believed that there's no one way to come at World War I. It's not just about the military history. It's not just about the diplomatic history. It's about the manifold ways in which World War I touched American society, changed American society, continues to influence American society today, whether it's the role of women and minorities in the country, whether it's its influence on the arts, whether it is the furtherance of the ongoing debate about the conflict between national security and civil liberties, the debate about America's role in the world. There are many different areas of interest to come at World War I, and as Terry said, and as I've said, all history is ultimately local. And one way to come at the history of World War I is through the local community, starting with your family, through your local community, through your state. That is a more tangible, a more focused way for people to comprehend the war. And so again, what you all are doing is so very important in that way. And then the third aspect is, I've been involved in World War I commemoration in one form or another for a number of years now, and sometimes it gets a little discouraging because it doesn't seem like anybody cares or anybody's paying attention. And then you come across people that are out there on their own initiative, on their own dime, undertaking something that they're passionate about. And it reminds me that, as is so often the case in this country, most of the best work that we do as a nation is done from the ground up and done by people at the local level with local initiative, supporting their own personal cause and contributing to the national conversation and discussion about the war. So for all those reasons, it's very meaningful to be here today and to hear about and commend what you all are doing. In addition to 100 cities, the Commission's got three main areas of focus. One is support of the state commissions, the second is the National World War I Memorial, and the third is education. And I don't know if I can get up the images that I sent over for the memorial. I don't know. I sent over those photos. Okay. Megan told me they were teed up somewhere, but I don't know how to get to them. Two photographs of the sculpture for the National World War I Memorial. They're not in the state presentation. I don't know where she.
No, that's all Illinois. I'm sorry, Edwin, they had them, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, sorry about that glitch. I had sent over some at the very end. Said the voice behind the curtain. There we go, right there. So this is a teaser. As I said at the press conference, if you were here, this is our sculptor, Sabin Howard. How do I freeze it so that it doesn't, so that it stops? This is our sculptor, Sabin Howard. Sabin is one of the leading figurative sculptors working in the country today. He was brought into the project by the young fellow, Joseph Weishar, who won the design competition at the age of 25 out of the University of Arkansas School of Architecture. And so we've been working with Sabin for 18 months now, sort of developing this image. And as I said, Sabin's method is to stage scenes and shoot them in photographs, and then compile those and reduce them to just absolutely beautiful hand-done sketches. And that's what we've worked on as we've sort of pushed the memorial design through the review process in Washington. And then just a couple months ago, Sabin went down to New Zealand, and this is where he is. He's at the Weta workshop. If you think of George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch out in California, which is a big film and entertainment technology facility, Peter Jackson, who did the Lord of the Rings trilogy, has the same kind of facility in New Zealand. And Sabin has gone down there, and they have scanned his photographic work and generated CAD drawings, basically, of the sculpture. And then in sort of the inverse of 3D printing, they've taken large blocks of styrofoam, essentially, and carved mechanically out of the styrofoam the first cut at a three-dimensional, what they call a maquette, a model of a scale model of a sculpture. And then Sabin is beginning the process of then starting to apply clay to that basic framework and to develop what will be a 10-to-1 scale model of the proposed sculpture. So it'll be about 7 feet long and 12, 14 inches high. And so this is Sabin at work, and this is a little small, showing you the whole thing, but that is the current rendering of what we've got proposed for this site at Pershing Park in Washington. That's again proposed to be about a 65-foot bronze bas-relief. One thing that this computer technology enables Sabin to do is bring the depth of the relief much farther out, and rather than just being sort of 3 or 4 inches off the surface, he can really almost make it sculpture in the round, and using technology to really accelerate his process. And so as you see it really start to come out of the back surface, it really pops, and it really starts to get exciting. But so for those of you who weren't here in the morning, and to the extent you can see here, this tableau starts here on the left side with a soldier taking leave from his wife and daughter. His daughter hands him his helmet. In the next scene, he then joins the call to arms, the parade to war. Again, typifying not just his personal experience, but the nation's experience in stepping onto the international stage, becoming an outwardly focused nation as opposed to an inwardly focused. The mother, the wife, they're sort of with their hand on his arm as if pulling him back, sort of represents the debate in this country about whether or not to go to war. But he joins the procession to war, and what begins as an orderly parade. And by the way, in that grouping, one of the challenges in any kind of war memorial is how historically accurate to be, and how much artistic, creative, dramatic license you take. And African American units did not fight alongside white units, and so how do you handle that? And one way to do that is in the parade scenes is to have soldiers, from the African American regiments, from the white regiments, marching together as they symbolically did in the war. And then the parade starts to break down, and the sculpture starts to become a bit more turbulent, a bit more kinetic, a bit more passionate, or even violent as you get these soldiers charging out of the trench and across the open field, led by this central figure calling them forward. I told Sabin, I want you to illustrate for me one of the famous battle cries out of the Battle of Belleau Wood. Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever? And that central figure there with his gun pointed forward and his hand outstretched behind him, calling his comrades forward, is meant to illustrate that. And then you get through the battle scene, you get to scenes of loss and casualty and sacrifice. Here you're able to introduce the role of women in the war in the form of nurses. And then the recurring figure shows up again, sort of staring straight out at the viewer. I told Sabin to illustrate this 1,000-yard stare and just have that soldier engage very directly with the viewer. And then the soldier joins the parade off stage, representing the homecoming parades. You've got a figure there looking back at an American accomplishment, symbolically representing America's entry into the American century that followed World War I. And then lastly, the soldier at the end, returning his helmet to his daughter. The mother is not in that scene, as if to indicate she died from influenza. But the soldier hands his helmet to his daughter, representing the passing of the legacy on to the greatest generation and foreshadowing the war that would follow 20 years later. So that's the memorial. I hope you'll stay tuned as it continues to develop, and we'll certainly be reaching out to you for ways that you can help support it. So that's the second main task of the commission. The third and probably most important task is education. And with that, I will turn it over to Libby OConnell, my fellow commissioner, who is leading our educational efforts.
Thank you, Edwin. And thank you all for being here. Good morning. I first would like to just, like everyone else who has stood here at the microphone, say thank you to the Pritzker Museum and Military Museum and Library. Without their sponsorship, I know that I wouldn't have begun to be able to work on educational projects, and so much of what all of us are doing has been inspired by the hard work that goes on here. And I just want to thank Ken Clark and Susan and the whole team for everything that they've done for the commemoration of the World War I centennial. I have the honor of being the commissioner who's in charge of the education committee, but it's a as has been mentioned, it's not like we have a lot of big bank account, right? We're thinking, how are we going to get this done? And the way we get it done is by working with our partners, right? So first, I know there are representatives here from our veteran service organizations, the American Legion, and the VFW. Thank you so much for the support you've given us and the participation. They have been, the American Legion gave us a grant. We've been able to set up teacher workshops across the country. It's with the Gilder Lehrman Institute, which is a really highly regarded, historically focused educational service, and they've been terrific to work with. I also want to thank or recognize the role of our ex officio partners. It's people like the Library of Congress and National Archives and the Smithsonian, National History Day. They're part of our charter. They have to work with us. I'm used to working for a for-profit. In my other life, I was the chief historian at the History Channel, and we'd go to places like the Library of Congress and give them a grant and say, let's work together. And they'd say, sure, we like that check and we'll work with you. And it all turned out very well. And I thought, how are we going to get these guys to work with us without handing them a check? But the charter from Congress helped a lot. So they've been wonderful to work with, and we've been very lucky to be able to be part of publications with the Library of Congress. It's going to be coming out this fall for teachers. It's going to be free for all educators in the United States, as well as the Smithsonian. We're working with them on their traveling exhibits, and with a little bit of money, we're going to be able to work and get that material out to teachers and schools and libraries as well. So that's really exciting. But finally, and most importantly, is the work that you all are doing in the field. Because we can't be everywhere, no matter how much funding we were given. And we weren't given any. But if we were given a lot, we have to count on you and the good work that you're doing. And I get photographs sent to me by people and reports in our dispatch, and I have very little sense of the strength of everything that's going on, but I do have a sense of how big it is. And when we started, we were worried that we would be talking into the wilderness, but in fact, there are voices that are being heard in every state, and this Midwest region, the upper Midwest region, has just been dynamite. Thank you so much. You're helping. Every time you have a public program, every time there's a state fair and there are images and poppy displays, every time you are reaching out to the local libraries or talking to people or working on your memorials, you're helping to get the story of World War I out. And that's something we as a National Commission cannot do without your work. And we're so thankful and so impressed by what you've accomplished. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here today. And cheers to you all.
Okay, I am going to ask for, let's see if I can I have tech support's help in rolling back the PowerPoint? Thank you. Just do it 10 times faster than what I could. We will now hear from the state delegates. Many of them have traveled quite a distance to be with us today. These states represent nearly 1.3 million men and women who served in the armed forces during World War I. Each state has a commemorative organization. Some are formal commissions, while others may be officially designated committees. Let me remind you again to hold your questions until the conclusion of each presentation. And for those attending live stream, please use the chat feature anytime during the presentation. Our first presenter represents Illinois. We'll be going in alphabetical order, and that is Jean Homaker. Jean is incredible. She is a retired history teacher of, I'll let her tell you how many years. She is the chair of the Illinois World War I Centennial Committee, and the significance is that Illinois does serve as the hub and support for all of the states. So with that, I'm going to have Jean join us.
Before I begin, I would like to take a moment as chair of the Illinois Centennial Committee to welcome you all here to Illinois and to recognize members of the Illinois Committee who are here with us today. So you guys raise your hand to let everyone know that we've got some representatives here from Illinois. Thank you. And should you have any questions or need assistance, they are here to act as ambassadors to help you out. So please feel free. They'll be here with with us for lunch as well. So, Illinois. Back in the summer or so of 2015, this group met and they trying to figure out how to commemorate World War I. By April 1st of 2016, our governor, Bruce Rauner, had, via proclamation, designated us officially as the Illinois World War I Centennial Committee. And we have been off and running since then, of course, as always, without funding. But we have done a lot. So how I'm going to do my presentation is that you're going to see a lot of pictures of things that have been going on in Illinois, and I'm going to speak over it, and I'm going to really share with you how, as we've talked about, history is local, how the commemoration is local. So I'm going to kind of take you on a tour of Illinois, and by the time you're done, you will have heard and seen pictures of all these events around Illinois. So, with that, I'm going to begin. Okay. I'm going to start with the Mississippi River. Up in the northwest are the Quad Cities. We've got Moline and Rock Island. So Moline has done, their public libraries held World War I in America exhibits. One of our members of our committee has actually spoken there. And then you get in your car and you leave Moline and you drive about 150 miles south following that Mississippi River, and you get down to this little town of Quincy, right there by Hannibal, right, the border of Illinois and Missouri. And Quincy has a history museum. They have had an symposium there with authors speaking, and then you also have the most incredible World War I story being told about Quincy and Adams County at the same museum. Okay, so you're finished with Quincy. Now, you get back in your car. You drive about 80 miles, I would say, southeast, and you end up in the town of Jacksonville. Now, I was there over Labor Day weekend, and they hosted a Chautauqua. Thank you, Seward, Nebraska, for actually introducing me to Chautauqua for the first time. And they had interpreters of Alvin York, Woodrow Wilson, Noble Sissel, and General Pershing. From there, I also spent a day in Springfield, because that's only about 40 minutes from there. Springfield, don't forget, you have the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Museum. Now, what's interesting is they do World War I commemorative events there as well. They have talks on trench warfare. They have talks about America getting into World War I. And they show films like Paths of Glory. Also in Springfield, back in spring, there was a symposium from the Illinois History Symposium focusing on 1917. We had 3 of our members from our committee actually presenting at that same symposium. Finally, and more importantly, in Springfield, we have the Illinois State Military Museum. and that museum hosted in March a World War I muster. In March, about 10 days before the U.S. declared war, the 1st, 5th, and 6th Regiments of Illinois National Guard were mobilized. And so they did reenactment there to recognize that event. Now get back in your car, drive east 70 miles, and you're in a town called Monticello, where they have an Illinois Railway Museum. And this August, they commemorated the time when the Illinois Army National Guard traveled to Camp Logan in Texas, boarding the trains which took them to Texas. Going north, you end up in my favorite county, McLean County, which is the most active county here in Illinois. And that county has tons of little small museums that typically would have nothing to do with World War I, but they're still doing something World War I related. And then they have Illinois State University, which, going back to the idea of education, they have done a series of lectures for the senior citizens of the community, all about World War I. So we're looking at educating all aspects of society. Then you head north, and you're in the Chicago suburbs. You've got Orland Park Library. You've got Barrington History Museum, which we had. Gerald was there, and his daughter Debbie were there, so they had a chance to meet the York family. We've got to talk about the other side of the war. In McHenry County, you had the Eugene Debs presentations talking about free speech and constitutional rights. And then we can't forget Aurora, the City of Aurora, their branches of service plaque, and you want to check out the Cook County Forest Preserve and Des Plaines and the 2nd Indian Head Division of Bellowwood Monument. Both of those have received Landmarks Illinois World War I grants to restore their memorials. And Landmarks Illinois is going to be doing several of these over the next year. And we can't forget Chicago. You know, Chicago has things too. They have the Pullman Historic Site. University of Illinois Chicago has done a program on nurses in Chicago's based hospitals. Northwestern University had Northwestern Remembers the First World War. That exhibit is no longer up physically in the libraries. However, they are online, and it is a continually growing online exhibit. So please check that out. And of course, Chicago Memorial Day Parade. Not only did the PMML have its float, but we had World War I reenactors as well. You could head out to Rockford, so head straight west, almost to the Wisconsin border, and you've got Rockford. You've got a Christmas truce in December, and then in April, the Great War reenactment, which several people here from other states have also visited. It was tremendous. Now, where do we go from here? Well, next year, I'm going to be probably reporting about McLean County. Bloomington's doing their cemetery walk, and they're focusing on several individuals from World War I, including some members of the 370th who lived in Bloomington. Pritzker will continue with its book talks. They have one coming up already in October. I'll have to get it on the agenda for next year. And they have an exhibit opening in December, lest we forget the Great War. And that will be focusing on the war being told from the soldiers' perspectives, as well as Illinois history of the 33rd and the 370th. Speaking of the 370th, next year will be a big year for them. We've already heard that they are one of the recipients of one of the 100 City 100 Memorial Grants, but they will have an exhibit at the DuSable Museum coming up. And then they're launching this new program, which Colonel Scott referred to earlier this morning, the Google Exhibitions, which, of course, is a virtual reality and augmented reality tour for those of us who are a little older and can remember the old Viewmasters. That's what it kind of looks like to me. Okay, it's going to be a box. Students will look at it, and it's going to get into the Chicago Public Schools. Think about the stories, and they will take home. And they're going to become the history tellers, and they're going to tell their families about what things they saw in those videos in the classroom. And they'll be on visual tours. Their teachers will kind of be the leaders, the tour guides as well. So it's going to be this incredible program, and it is wonderful that we're going to be one of those places to actually kick it off. And finally, we have some music coming up also in 2018, and that will be, we've got a cabaret being created by several of our members, and they will be telling the story of World War I through word and music in a cabaret format. And our own Chicago Symphony Orchestra will be performing a symphony that has been commissioned to commemorate World War I. And now I'm done. And thank you. And by the way, if you ever want to see something, look at our website. We always have our calendar on the website. So please feel free, if you're driving through Illinois and want to find something, just look there.
We do have, Jean and I have one special thing to do to someone who's via live stream and who couldn't be with us today. He's under the weather, but he's a very special member of our Illinois committee, and it's his
birthday. So hi there, Greg. We miss you.
And happy birthday, Greg, from all of us here at the PMML and from the Illinois committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to have and now introduce to you the director of the Indiana State Archives, Jim Cordan, my colleague in Indiana, is joining us. I've had the privilege of touring and will be back in Indiana before I know it. When it's chilly outside the first couple days of November. So you're going to hear all about the wonderful things that are going on in the state of Indiana. Jim?
Thank you, Susan, and I should share with you that it's always perfect in Indiana, so you're welcome anytime. It's great to be here with all of you, and we're going to talk a little bit about maybe a couple of things that we've done, but more so what we're doing coming up in Indiana. We have, whoops, if I can do this on my own, which I may not. Nope, I got it. Thank you. So these are some of the members of our committee, and we meet in the Indiana War Memorial in downtown Indianapolis, which was built after the war, and in fact the American Legion's national headquarters is located on the same property. This is our first event that was the kickoff on April 6th. Since then, we've also had an opportunity to do things at the Indiana State Fair, where there's over 1 million people that come through every year, and so we had an exhibit up there. We have an exhibit that's going to be traveling across the state. Our Indiana Department of Veterans Affairs is helping us move the exhibit from location to location, so public libraries and museums in Indiana can check it out. And after the entire Centennial celebration is over, we'll be happy to share that exhibit with other states. I'm sure you're not interested, but I just want to throw that out there. One of the first things we have coming up now is our program for Alex Arch. As the state archivist of Indiana, it's fascinating because you think you know a lot about your state's history, especially in that position. But I've learned so much more about the soldiers and people and the stories that occurred from Hoosiers because of the opportunity to work with World War I. So Alex Arch is the first person from South Bend, Indiana, who actually fires the first shot by American forces in France. On October 23rd, and so, or excuse me, it's October 23rd, I think. And so 100 years later in South Bend, we will be commemorating that event at his gravesite. And the Vincennes Indiana Military Museum down in Vincennes, Indiana. And I should mention the co-chair of our committee, or vice chair of our committee, is here, Jim Osborne, and he's the president of that museum. We'll be shooting off a 75 millimeter artillery piece, French artillery piece, that was the same type used in South Bend, or in South Bend, yeah, when we were fighting the Michigan people. Just kidding. I don't think they're here, right? Am I good to say that? I don't think they're here today. Yeah, exactly. Really, they will be firing, actually we'll be firing it toward Illinois and Vincennes, but that's a different story. So I better move on. Okay. On November 2nd, we have an event also in Vincennes sponsored by the Military Museum and is a statewide endorsed project. This is the dedication of the M1917 U.S. tank. The Military Museum, through donations, was able to take lots of parts and rehabilitate an old World War I tank, and so that will be dedicated. And we're very pleased to have members of the commission, including the chair, joining us at the dedication that night. On the next day in Evansville, Indiana, one of the first 3 men who died in the first combat casualties in Europe. James Bethel Gresham is from Evansville, Indiana, and so at his gravesite, we'll be joined by the General Consul of France from Chicago, who will be coming down, as well as the Mayor of Evansville, perhaps the Secretary of State of Indiana, and other dignitaries, including Terry, who will be speaking, and this grandson of General George Patton will be one of our speakers. So it'll be a fairly big event. We're excited to be having that. That's at noon Central Time on November 3rd. And again, you're all welcome to attend all of these events. Another thing we have coming up is April 14th of 2018, Helen Provence, Huntington, Indiana. She was one of the first donut girls for the Salvation Army, and was actually the one who was cooking the donuts for the first time in the fields of France. And so we're going to be commemorating her service to the country. Following her is Opha May Jacob, who later marries Mr. Johnson. And in 1918, in August, I believe, these dates are off. In August, she will be, we'll be dedicating a service for her in Kokomo, Indiana, which is where she was born. She is the first female U.S. Marine legally. There was like women joining but dressing as men all the way back to the American Revolution, but she's the first legal U.S. Marine, and so Indiana is pleased to be honoring her and her contributions. And we will be joined by retired Marine Corps General, 3-star General Carol Mutter, who became the first 3-star female Marine at that service, and she also lives in Indiana. So as you can see, everything is centered around Indiana. All important things happen there. So on September 3rd, which is Labor Day in 2018, in a small town called Lyle Station, which has a tremendous history of its own. It was a free black settlement, started back in the 1840s and 50s. A gentleman named Aaron Fisher was from there, and Aaron Fisher is the most decorated African-American soldier from Indiana, from the war, and so we'll be having a ceremony for him at that location. And then the next event will be for Samuel Woodfill. Samuel Woodfill is the only soldier from Indiana to be to receive the Medal of Honor after World War I, and along with Alvin York is one of the pallbearers at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Washington, D.C. So we've extended an invitation. We hope we'll get a letter, because I know that you'll all be in France that day, but we hope that we can get something from the York family in commemoration of that. So we're excited about that event. That's in Madison, Indiana. So please feel free to connect with us. You can contact us through all these different channels, and we are continuing to be very active and look forward to working with the National Commission. So thank you from Indiana.
Jim does a great job. He's been a joy to work with. We are actually co-presenting at the DAR conference on October 29th, our Indiana's national conference. A state conference, I should say, so it's really fun to work with him. I've developed a tremendous friendship with Tim Lane, who'll be joining us next from Iowa. I flew to Iowa and attended one of their first Iowa meetings in Des Moines, and I have never toured a city and been so in awe of someone who is so aware of their local history. So Tim, would you join us up here and share all the wonderful things that are going on in your state of Iowa?
No, Susan, I don't have enough time for that, but I'm going to give some of the highlights. My clicker, and I hit this one on the right. Excellent. Looks like we're all set to go. Thank you. I am Tim Lane from the Iowa World War I Centennial Committee, and that group is a group primarily from central and eastern Iowa that meets monthly to promote a remembrance of the role of Iowans during World War I. The organizations that are represented include the Herbert Hoover not trusting myself here. The Herbert Hoover Presidential Museum and Library, Fort Des Moines, the Iowa Gold Star Military Museum, State Library of Iowa, the State Historical Museum of Iowa, as well as many interested citizens from various different areas. I would like to point out that the Herbert Hoover Memorial, Iowans, even before the start of the war, were serving by feeding individuals in the kind of the war-starved Europe of the time. The Iowa Committee mobilized in 2016 and has worked on activities and programs since that time. The Iowa Gold Star Military Museum opened their World War I exhibit on April 2016. In March 2017, the State Historical Museum loaned a set of World War I posters to the Council Bluffs Public Library in the western part of the state, and committee members provided programming. The committee Sorry. I'm going to go ahead with the narrative, and we'll catch up with the images as Brad does his work there. The committee has also initiated a set of educational programs in conjunction with Drake University, one of which I will be doing tomorrow morning in Des Moines, Iowa. Are you going to be my? Okay. Okay. Activities for the Centennial event were kicked off on April 1st, 2017 by Governor, now Ambassador Terry Branstad, who signed a Centennial Proclamation for the state of Iowa. The Gold Star Museum organized a series of presentations and activities at the museum on April 7th. The State Historical Museum also opened the Iowa and the Great War exhibit at that time. The committee has an active Facebook, and I want to pause here and thank Leo Landis, who's done the lion's share of that work, with posts 2 to 3 times a month. The topics have included a declaration of war on April 6th, the organization of black officers training at Fort Des Moines, the construction of Camp Dodge, and the national activities, including fundraising for the National Memorial. I might point out that 2 of the stories involve the first woman to die in the war from the United States, and also one of the first servicemen, Merle Hay, to be one of the first American servicemen to die. Nearly every member of the committee has worked on interpretive projects and delivered public programs. Myself, I've been working with the City of Des Moines on signage for location recognizing World War I casualties. Jack Lufkin of Fort Des Moines has given a program for the Des Moines Public Library and another at the History Alive at the Iowa State Historical Museum. Mike Vogt has presented at Carroll, Sioux City, Iowa City, Sheraton, and other Iowa communities. We're about right. Leo Landis has presented at Anamosa and Monticello, the Iowa Monticello, not the Indiana Monticello or the Virginia Monticello. And the University of Iowa next month will be doing a presentation on the medical aspects, the public health aspects of the war. And again, the Spanish flu made this particular tragedy even more so. Our committee has endorsed a project by the Iowa artist Michael Wilson to create a traveling art exhibit based on the experiences of Wilson's great uncle. And he's got multiple programs scheduled. Another resource created by the State Historical Society is a tour of the Iowa Cultural mobile app featuring Iowa's World War I memorials. Our group has worked with Polk County and the City of Des Moines to nominate the Polk County Gold Star Memorial to increase awareness, and I was incredibly excited this morning to hear that it was one of the first 50 that was selected. And we look forward to offering additional programs through 2018 and remind Iowans of the important role our state had in the U.S. war effort in World War I and the work done by the National Commission. What you see before you is the John Burke Memorial in Des Moines. What you don't see is 100 to 200 people standing before it, learning of the great role of our servicemen in World War I. Our efforts are going to be increase traffic, increase awareness, and increase the remembrance of John Burke, who lived about 100 yards from this memorial, played, and as a youth, played around this particular area that overlooks the Des Moines River. In 1925, it was an incredibly popular spot for the city of Des Moines, but as our Des Moines grew, as our streets widened, as parking developed, it became less and less accessible to the public, and we're going to do our darndest to change that and drive traffic and remembrances in the state of Iowa.
Thank you.
And thank you for your assistance.
Wow, isn't Iowa amazing too? I'll just keep going, because wait till you hear, just when you think one state is doing incredible work, and then you get to see another. Commissioner Hamby, Gene Homaker and I and Terry Hamby's wife Carolyn all traveled to Kentucky, and we were able to spend time at the Kentucky State Fair, where I absolutely had the most incredible experience and got to witness the press conference about World War I, but mostly I got to spend time with the volunteers who filled sandbags, and you're going to hear quite a journey and a story from the advocate in World War I, and that is Deputy Commissioner Heather French Henry from the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs. Heather?
Should we play the video first? Okay. Well, good day. I'm Heather French Henry, the Deputy Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs. And before I begin, I'd like to introduce our video, which has sound in it, so I won't be able to talk over that. So let's play that first. Okay. Brad. There we go. Kentucky State Fair, and we are so proud to welcome you to your Camp Zachary Taylor Barracks here for the Kentucky Remembers the World War I Experience exhibit. We hope that you enjoy this exhibit throughout the fair through the 27th. But first,
for being here. As we noted, it's a big honor and privilege to serve as Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Veterans Affairs, representing all 331,000 veterans in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
nothing that a little Mac can't handle in iMovie, right? So I want to thank you all so much for being here. It's great to finally meet all of you all. I think I've heard many of you all through our conference, our phone calls, certainly over the year. It has been a great pleasure to be able to serve as the head of the Kentucky World War I Centennial Committee. We call ours more of a task force. Everyone sort of has equal say, equal vote, certainly in what we're doing statewide. And a lot of our partners, we created a committee of about 27 local, state, and national organizations that are housed within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And a lot of those individuals are members or running museums or projects of their own throughout the state. We are blessed to have 120 wonderful counties throughout our Commonwealth, and each has a very unique story. Given that Camp Taylor was one of only 16 camps built in the United States to train troops for World War I, we also had other installations like Camp Knox, which formed during World War I and went on to be Fort Knox. But we also had Fort Thomas. We also had a heavy presence of the Kentucky National Guard. So all 120 counties gave something during World War I, and each county has really taken upon itself a great responsibility to pay part of that commemoration. So we have been blessed to have a very active committee in our state, and one of the first things that we hit the ground running with was actually trying to get every county and city involved in a statewide proclamation effort. Of course, we led the effort with the governor, and we just provided our second signed copy for the museum here to have from the governor's office. But we wanted each city and each elected official to have their own responsibility in commemorating. And so we partnered with one of our members of our committee called the Kentucky League of Cities. So creative partnerships is what this is all about, right? Because you're only one person. So, and I can't travel all 120 counties. Well, I can, but not quite effectively in spreading the word, certainly. So you have to get others to help you do that work. So our Kentucky League of Cities is comprised of all the mayors throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And one of the ways that we can very simply get them involved without telling them they have to recreate a large exhibit or what have you is to have them do very simple proclamations in a time frame and at an event that possibly is already convenient for them. And again, it spurs on that commemoration of, hey, what is local to me? How did this directly impact our citizens? And with Kentucky being a heavy military state, especially for a state our size, we're only 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from World War I within our state's population. So we've been very blessed that we have had multiple cities across the state to actually start this, and we keep having proclamations coming in. And so I would encourage you to do the same in your state. I don't know if you have an organization that's comprised of all the mayors or elected officials. Like we also have KCO, which is our Kentucky County Judges organization. And so if you can get them on board, it's something easy for them to take back to their local community and for them to effectively be part of your commemoration. So that was very easy for us, certainly, to get started. Also, how do you get the newspapers involved? We actually went to our major universities throughout the Commonwealth, and we actually asked the history professors who might have an interest in spreading or doing an op-ed or an editorial piece for one of their local newspapers. And we found a lot of great response, everything from University of Kentucky to Murray State to the Kentucky Historical Society, beyond universities, Pikeville University, Northern Kentucky University, Western Kentucky University, to go ahead and write op-eds. And some of those op-eds not only had to do with commemorating the efforts, certainly, for World War I, but also talking about some of the tough challenges of World War I, some of the marches that World War I didn't begin with everyone being involved, as was noted with the wonderful statues that are going to be displayed in Washington, D.C., that there was a great struggle and a conflict. So we've created some open conversations within our printed material as well. Trying to get schools involved. So, of course, we talked about how do you make history come alive, 100-year-old history, when there are no World War I veterans left. One of those ways, of course, is to become interactive with this. And there was a wonderful project in Australia called the 5,000 Poppy Project when I was doing my research about this. And they created this wonderful opportunity for people all over Australia to actually crochet. Now, we've not gone so far as to demand crocheted poppies, but we have incorporated with their inspiration, we've incorporated that theme, and we call that our Kentucky Poppy Project. They, in their time frame, instead of 5,000 poppies, collected over 300,000 poppies. And so I wanted to find a way for our school children to be involved, to make this interactive, to bring history to life for them. And so the Kentucky Poppy Project was born, and we literally reached out, spent days emailing and contacting individually principals from every school in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, if you don't know, your Department of Education probably has printed or online a digital database or printed material of every high school email address for every principal, every teacher within the entire public school system. Will it take you days? Absolutely. Is it worth it? It's priceless, because we got comments and emails back from principals and teachers from all over the state. And so what we now have, before the state fair, we had collected over 2,000 poppies, and you saw some of the pictures of some of the classrooms. And I just want to tell you that this is this is part of the educational part, right, of World War I. How do we pass that legacy on? So I brought several pieces of poppies with me today, but one that I really love is a Girl Scout troop from Pulaski County. Not only did they make poppies as part of their art project, but they actually researched all of the World War I veterans within their county, and they made a poppy in honor of each one, placed their name, and then put the Girl Scout troop on the back. That meant that this veteran, Leslie Buckner from Pulaski County, was remembered over 100 years later. That's profound. And it's really why, my dad's a Vietnam veteran, it's really why the Vietnam Memorial is so powerful, because those names, those individuals, when you rub your hand across it, you read those names, their history and their sacrifice comes alive. And so I just want to encourage you, it's a very easy way to get teachers and students involved. It takes one class to make poppies. Southwestern High School, however, made 1,300 poppies for us. So we continued that onto our State Fair project, which was quite important because we wanted to create this poppy wall experience where state fair goers could also give of themselves and to commemorate not only World War I veterans, but veterans in general. Within Kentucky, we have 331,000 wonderful heroes, 24,000 sheroes, and we want everyone's sacrifice to be remembered because it's never too late. And throughout the state fair, we created a very simple poppy project that could be made out of paper, and actually very unique ways to use Velcro. You can use the loop side and the hook side. I never thought I'd know so much about Velcro, but I do now, certainly. And so we created this project where over 600,000 visitors who traverse through the state fair could be a part of that, and we filled an entire, not only poppy wall, but all of our displays were Velcro capable. So we created throughout the state fair this very organic Flanders field concept, and now we have over 6,000 poppies, and that particular project will live on throughout the World War I commemorative effort, and we're hoping in summer of 2019 to close out our commemoration by laying all of those thousands of poppies on the steps at the Kentucky Capitol to create a Flanders field going up to the state capitol so that we can honor all of our statewide heroes who served in World War I. And we've got more than just schools, Girl Scout troops, DAR chapters, individuals can do it, and they make them from coffee filters to felt to wreaths of poppies. It's been very interesting to see what types of poppies they've made. We created a Facebook page. We created a website, KentuckyPoppyProject.com. Please feel free to go on and copy, emulate, use whatever you need for your state, because it's a wonderful way to get your state's children certainly involved in that. We also were very blessed to be able to do the World War I commemorative baseball game, which we actually may be doing another one next year with the Louisville Bats. We've long had, with the Department of Veterans Affairs, a great cooperation and partnership with our minor league baseball teams in both Lexington and Louisville. And so when we got the charge to do the commemorative baseball game, Commissioner Habby came down. He threw a first pitch. He was able to participate within that, and we certainly appreciated that effort. And we actually created poppies there as well. So, and we actually handed out poppy seeds packets to the baseball goers as well. So again, how do you get the community involved? Well, you have to reach out in very unique and creative ways, because those of us who love the military and those of us who are involved are always going to go to military events, and we're always going to go to museums. But what about those missing millions that will never go to a museum, will never go to something that's just military related? How do you get to them? by going into baseball games, grocery stores, state fairs. It's very important. So then our largest effort this year, which took 7 months to design and to develop, which was great for me because I'm a designer by trade, so I love creating anything, certainly. Our state fair, as was said with Indiana, you capture hundreds of thousands of people who may never step into a museum or may never open a history book to learn about World War I. But if you put it in front of them and you make it free and you make it accessible and you make it interactive, they will come. Build it and they will come. So we are very blessed at our state fair. We have a wonderful educational exhibit area. We have a Health Horizons area. We've been doing free healthcare screenings for years. And so my husband, who was Lieutenant Governor of Kentucky for 8 years, he and I have both been involved with the state fair for over 2 decades. And to me, this was the pinnacle of our 2017 part of our commemoration, was to have a large World War I exhibit. And was it large? It was 10,000 square feet of space. We built a life-size Camp Taylor barracks. We built a trench area that was 40 feet in length that had live ambient trench sound. We had over 500 sandbags, and yes, I did help fill those sandbags, thanks. So if you want a great workout, that's the way to certainly do it. But it incorporated so many different pieces of logistics, and we knew that we had to raise money. I got corporate sponsorships. I called our folks from Home Depot. Would you build a life-size barracks? Ken McGuire from the Camp Zachary Taylor Historical Society. Could not have done this without him, certainly. But being able to provide those instances where people can come in with even 5 minutes of a snapshot, which is very important, folks, because when you're doing an exhibit in an open area, you can't do the war in chronological timeline because they can come into the war at any time, and you don't want them to miss a part of that. So what we did was I designed it so that it was broke down into subject matter. So you had animals in war, World War I technology, World War I medicine, you had the trench warfare, you had Camp Zachary Taylor, you had the Poppy Wall. So even if they spent 5 minutes and they just happened upon the part that was animals in war, they could very easily take away a very complete snapshot of that subject matter within World War I. What we wonderfully found out was that people did not spend 5 minutes. They spent anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour in the exhibit. We had kids who were going into the trench area. People were actually reading the graphic panels that we created, which was in and of itself a miracle. We created the entire timeline from the National World War I Museum on 2 very large 39 by 96 panels. I never thought people would read them, and they read them. So people are interested, but delivering in a manner with which excites them and interests them becomes the challenge. And so we took our state fair experience as a success. We will be developing a new part of that for the 2018 State Fair, which I'm extremely excited about. I've already got the sandbags filled, for goodness sake, so why not reuse those, right? But one of the things that we did also from the State Fair exhibit, much like what Indiana's concept was creating a traveling exhibit. So I designed this where this could actually break apart, and all through the year now we'll be traveling throughout the state. So we just loaded up a huge truckload of about half of the exhibit, and right now it opens. It's slated to open next week at the Kentucky Gateway Museum in Maysville, Kentucky, and then part of it will then travel to the Spirit of 45 event in October, and on and on and on as it's requested. If you ever thought that I would consider myself a curator of an exhibit, certainly of this magnitude, no, but my husband and I do professionally run and own the Rosemary Clooney Museum, so we do have some experience doing that. But that is one way to make history alive in the communities, and just one way that we feel excited that we were able to contribute to such a large endeavor. And piggybacking on existing events is exciting. Whether you have county fairs or fall festivals, you know, festivals were very important in World War I. In fact, when they were enlisting, when people were signing up, they would have fairs and they would sign up at fairs. And so for us in Kentucky, our county fairs and our fall festivals are a very important part of our heritage. And a lot of it has a ton of interaction with the entire general public. So for us, that's another way that we can certainly participate in such a big way. We will continue our efforts efforts. Again, throughout, I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I had given Susan that I would love to have shared with you all. Brought some printed material as well that shows an entire list of events over the next couple of years that have already been designated throughout the state of Kentucky. But again, it's just such a wonderful it's just such wonderful being here and to be able to partner with those of you who love honoring our nation's veterans. Again, it's never too late to say thank you for the sacrifice and service. As a daughter of a Vietnam veteran who came home to an unwelcoming nation, it's never too late to say thanks and never too late to say welcome home. So thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
So I have a little anecdote to share with you about Heather. There is nowhere in the state of Kentucky that I can go and not or where anyone can go and not have them know her. From the cab driver from the airport to the Department of Tourism volunteer, oh, you're here in our state, welcome. Who are you going to see? Heather French Henry. And this is what she said. Well, I see her at the grocery store all the time, but I never let her know because I just watch her. But I know who she is. Everywhere throughout the state, they know Heather and her dedication and her hard work on behalf of the veterans. So thank you so much. I'd like to now continue on. We're moving right along with our states. And we have next up is Michigan. And Dennis Skupinski has been the champion for that state. He has rumbled, he has jumped up and down, he's beat the drums, and he's got some exciting news to share with you about Michigan. So, welcome, Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Skupinski from Michigan, and Michigan's been a real grassroots World War I Centennial project. Back in 2012 in the spring, I started to join the World War I Centennial Commission in Michigan, and there wasn't one, so I started basically beating the drums to get a World War I Centennial Commission. Well, I'm sort of like Rodney Dangerfield. I got no respect from the governor, no respect from the legislature. So luckily, the National Commission came along, and Susan came along, and we managed to get outside pressure in and get a World War I Centennial Commission. It was signed by the governor on July 13th, and hopefully in October he'll appoint members of the commission. Rather than bore you with my talking, I'm from a sales and marketing background, so what it is, I created a video. I wanted to show you some important people and some important projects that Michigan contributed to the First World War, and also some events that we've done and for the World War I Centennial. And I want you to listen to Tartanius Flynn in the dugouts. And how do we start the video?
Yankee Doodle do or die. you and the old red, white, and blue. Over there, send the word over there. The Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums are coming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. Early over, running over, and we won't come back. There's no word over there. When the history of war is over and the nations have settled down to peace and to friendly relations, and our laddies are homeward bound, each nation will boast of its heroes and point to the deeds they have done. But out above the rest will stand the boys we love the best, our ladies and old khaki. Here's to the boys in khaki, God bless them one and all. Here's to the boys in khaki, who answer our country's call. Each loyal heart beats true for the old red, white, and blue, the flag they love the best.
And just to let you know, the reason why you see me taking pictures and videotaping during this is because I do a monthly video called Michigan's World War I Centennial News Report. And the reason why I do is because I've been documenting events and things going on in Michigan since 2012. So that's what I'm going to be doing with this footage I've taken here.
Okay, joining us on stage right now is probably one of the most unassuming, creative individuals I have ever had the privilege to meet. That is so, I just am in awe of what Randall Dietrich can do. So Randall invited me to join him to visit the exhibit at the Minnesota Historical Society, and I flew in, and I have to tell you, I was absolutely wowed and humbled, and got to meet with many of the state representatives. And Randall is here now to share with you some information about what's happening in Minnesota.
Hey, good morning. How's everybody doing? Come on, we're doing all right? Excellent. My name is Randall Dietrich. I serve as Executive Director of the Minnesota Military Museum at Camp Ripley, and also have the privilege of working with Twin Cities Public Television in support of the Vietnam documentary that many of us are watching. So we've been excited about World War I. Following Heather's lead, we did a little video that I'll open with, and then have a couple of quick comments at the end and wrap things up. But here's what Minnesota's been up to recently.
Inspired by Kansas City's Pantheon mural, Minnesotans created a 30-foot mural of our own. It depicts 100 specific individuals who helped to shape or were shaped by the Great War and had a hand in making modern America. Students have benefited by this effort to make the war relevant, as the State Historical Society developed a teacher portal full of World War I artifacts. Minnesota Public Radio hosted an evening of World War I music and storytelling from a theater named for a famed Minnesotan from the era. This live stage show was recorded and broadcast statewide in April of 2017. Museums and county historical societies across the state developed exhibits enjoyed by thousands of visitors. One of these exhibits will travel to museums throughout the country in the years to come. Looking forward, the Minnesota Military Museum will lead the effort to develop further programming to commemorate the 1918 armistice while Kurt Brown of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune completes a book on the Great War, the Spanish flu, as well as the forest fire that stunned the state. In the aftermath of the Great War, the American Legion convened their very first national convention in Minneapolis, and we will welcome them once again in 2018 for their 100th convention.
So, like many states, there have been exhibits at various county historical societies statewide, and a lot of other state efforts with that committee involved in a lot of it. But one of the governing questions that we approached it with: what lens do we see this? You all know this history and how broad it is. A question that we tried answering, or a point we tried getting at in a lot of our work, was just relevance. Why is the story that we're telling so passionately relevant today? And that mural project is one that has had a lot of resonance for us. You know, the Pantheon de la Guerre in Kansas City, 6,000 people depicted in this painting. So we commissioned David Geister to paint a mural 30 feet long, as wide as the auditorium is, to depict 100 specific Americans who had a hand in making modern America. They were involved in or were shaped by their World War I experience, but what these people did after the war shaped the world that we live in now. America, with its complexities and contradictions that we all live with as we make our way home, these Americans you see depicted arguably had a really strong hand in that. And just as I listen to some of you talk about people in passing, be assured that of those 100 people, specific individuals referenced, they're depicted in that mural. And there's biographies of each one of them. Eugene Debs came up. He's one of those people. James Reese Europe, a fantastic soldier, incredible musician, and did so much to welcome jazz music to Europe and the rest of the world, for that matter. He's depicted. Henry Ford is in that painting as well. Herbert Hoover, for sure, is in that painting. So what is done, including Ray Kroc and Ernest Hemingway and Alice Paul and all kinds of other people in that mural that's almost done and being painted in public view at the Minnesota History Center. So people have been able to see it being painted as it's opened. We opened the exhibit in April, and it's almost done now in October, and so people have been able to come back to the History Center in St. Paul and see this painting taking shape and read the biographies and have conversations, and for many even pick up a brush and add a few paint strokes of their own. Students and young people, little kids, have had a chance to paint a little part of that painting. The governor was by the other day, and he added his own brush strokes to this mural. So it's a great way to talk about a very broad topic that we all understand, but to condense it down into something that is essentially a 30-foot long snapshot of the world that we live in today. The exhibit that was mentioned that travels the country, I know we all are faced with funding challenges, in this case the exception perhaps, but with the great generosity of the National Endowment for the Humanities, about a $600,000 grant was granted to the History Center to create that traveling exhibit that will go to Texas and California and to the East Coast in years to come. And then finally, just want to make reference to the Minnesota Military Museum at Camp Ripley, and us are very committed to working with all of you in the months and year to come to really put a capstone on the centennial next year at the Armistice and all of that. So looking to work in partnership with as many people here as are willing, which you know is part of our conversation this afternoon, but in partnership with you, I trust that we can have a terrific centennial to the end of the war in 2018. Thanks.
Thank you. Now we have a wonderful opportunity to meet a very special, energetic individual whose enthusiasm and infectious passion infuses, again, energy into a room. His name is Jerry Meyer. He is the chair of the Nebraska World War I Centennial Committee, who jumped up and down and said, I want to be in your region, I want to be in your region, I want to be in your region, until I said, yes, you can be in my region. And so I'm honored today to have Jerry and his beautiful wife, Mary, who are joining us here today from Nebraska.
An admin note, I don't remember that conversation going like that, but I appreciate that. On behalf of our Adjutant General, Major General Darrell Bohack, and the 4,000 men and women of the Army and Air National Guard of Nebraska, it is indeed an honor to be here. I'd like to thank Colonel Pritzker Military Museum Library, the World War I Commission, especially Susan. It did kind of go along that way, that conversation. But when Nebraska started down the path of creating something to commemorate the anniversary of World War I, I'm the historian for the Nebraska National Guard. So it was we had just opened a new museum just west of Lincoln in a little town called Seward. Suzanne's been there, Jean's been there. It's kind of like Norman Rockwell and Mayberry all wrapped into one. So it's very, very nice, scenic, bucolic American city just next to Lincoln. It is also probably one of the more patriotic cities in Nebraska. It's considered to be Nebraska's 4th of July city. If you think of our Nebraska game day for football games, our Memorial Stadium in honor of our World War I veterans is the 3rd largest city in the state on game day. And, Seward's the same way. When we have our 4th of July, we see almost 50,000 people in a town of 7,000. And it really is, it was a great place to put our museum. Some of the things you see coming up on the screen there are some of the highlights of things that we've done in the past and what we're doing in the future to commemorate. Our society that goes with our museum is kind of our World War I Commission. We do a lot of collaborative things. I'm impressed with every state that's come up here before. You all talk about partnerships, and that's the key. That's the key to how we succeed. But one of the things we did, and that Suzanne and Jean stopped in and saw, was the thing called Chautauqua. Chautauqua starts in New York, and 100 years ago, before TV and movies and radio, they would bring education and society out to the boonsticks, out to Nebraska, and they'd put up a large white tent and they'd bring speakers and entertainment out there. Our museum was located on Old Chautauqua Park, and we brought the Chautauqua back. We were one of the host cities for this year for 2017. It was a week-long event. Susan and Jean come out early to see some of the pre-events there. The museum hosted some things to get everybody excited about it. And how do you get people excited? I tell you what, if you want a General Pershing, write this name down, Dave Shuey from Pennsylvania. Have him come to your activities. Dave can ride a horse, and boy can he ride a horse. And I tell you, you ought to see the people that come out of the woodwork to see this guy. He was always in character. So we had Dave Shuey. You need a pilot, you need a World War I plane, look up Tom Martin. And these are people that Suzanne can get you, help you get. He flew a Newport 23 up one day, and then it was windy for the whole week. He couldn't fly it back, so I had him for the whole week. What a deal. It was a great deal. Save some money. We did a medical presentation. We had our reenactors build us a World War I trench, and just like Kentucky and everybody else that's built trenches, I tell you, it's quite a thing to have that. What's really cool is when you bring students in and you're standing there and they say, okay, we're going to administer some mustard gas in this trench. And they're like, no, and we open up a small container that's labeled mustard gas. Does anybody know what that stuff smells like? Horseradish. And all the time, every kid goes, well, my grandma makes mustard gas in the kitchen. No, no, that's horseradish, but that's the smell. And so we got a lot of that interactive thing going on in our trench. So we've got that for a couple of years. We're very, very excited. Another thing that we do is vaudeville shows. Again, I had, being the historian for the National Guard, we had done 2 previous Bob Hope shows for 1945 and 46. So we did some Bob Hope shows for the end of World War II. So I kind of had some build up to this. But we did a World War I show called Vaudeville 1917, Sousa Comes to Seward. Well, John Philip Sousa, if you know, he joined the Naval Reserve, I think here in Illinois, and traveled around the country to promote the war during the war years. He stopped in Seward on the train. Our city band got in costume, played Sousa marches. We brought in acts, accordion players, musicians, all sorts of stuff. You'll see Uncle Sam in one of the pictures, see my daughter singing in one of them. But it was a great community. It was a way to kick off our 4th of July. We do this every year for the community. So we'll do another vaudeville show next year called Vaudeville 1918 Welcome Home. And again, since we don't have any of the veterans here, we welcome home the families too. And a lot of the thing about bringing Dave Shuey and Pershing to your event is a lot of World War I families brought their photos of their father or grandfather to Pershing. And there was one lady that says, is that really General Pershing? No, he's 156 years old, but no, that's not Pershing. But he looks just like him. I used to put Pershing next to an oil painting of him right in the museum, and he would stand there very, very still. And people would come up there and they go, oh my gosh, that mannequin looks so real. And all of a sudden he'd move, and then, it really brings that effect of, some really cool stuff. Some of the other things we do with our 4th of July, because we have so many people there. Okay, you've got a captured audience when you can bring 40, 50,000 people to your small town. There's things for them to do. In 2017, we remembered our fallen, and we did a wreath-laying ceremony. We did a lot of our World War I activities in the museum, a lot of reenactors, again, horse riders, that type of stuff. The one thing about horses, there was a byproduct. You remember to have the guy, yeah, remember that. But we love having a lot of the reenactors. That brings so much to your events. 2018, like I said, we're going to bring back Pershing, but we're also going to bring a couple other characters. Dave Shuey has a lot of contacts, just like Suzanne, to help you out. We found Teddy Roosevelt. Man, what a blessing. We get Teddy Roosevelt. There's another one. And then we've got General Patton. And, to bring those people to your 4th of July and bring them to your events really, really helps out. The last thing, some of our outreach. I spent 15 years in the public school classroom, and then I deployed back to Afghanistan. It was safer. That was a joke. But I love teaching, but I do really love my job. As a historian of the National Guard, I do have students come in a lot. But we also, like all the other states here, you got to do the outreach. You just can't sit at a museum and let people, discover you that way. You've got to go out, and the State Fair, prime example. The Nebraska State Fair moved from Lincoln out to Grand Island, out in the boonies, and it, there's a lot of people that would probably never see Seward or never see a museum unless you took it to them. And do that. I mean, just that's one of the keys to our success. We showed the Sergeant York movie, the Gary Cooper movie, and Susan and Jean were there. And there was 250 people. We had a historic Rivoli Theater, the ones with the lower and the top level. And I could have swore we were 1941 Gary Cooper premiere movie night. And we invited the York family, but we had General Pershing there at that. And when you do things where you combine a classic movie that I hadn't seen in a while with an event, it really, really makes for kind of a neat thing. So we were very, very happy to have that be as successful as it was. But we're very, very proud of the Nebraska National Guard Museum and what they've done to assist the World War I Commission. I'd like to thank everybody here for the opportunity to come up and speak a little bit about Nebraska, and I look forward to seeing you all later. Thank you.
Moving along, we have with us right now a representative from North Dakota. This gentleman was identified through an opportunity and a chance meeting in France with Commissioner Monique Seafried, who said, Daryl Dorgan, you're in North Dakota and we need you. We need that energy and your network to launch and develop the North Dakota World War I Centennial Committee. And Daryl Dorgan never hesitated. He said the words, yes. And I'm telling you, you should see now, when you see what he's done, it is amazing. And he is so loved, and I am so honored that he's my World War I friend. So, Daryl, thank you.
Okay, we put together a little video, but before we did that, let me talk a little bit about North Dakota. I did get drafted into this job. The governor of North Dakota never appointed anyone to be the head of the committee. And so I kind of got drafted into it by accident. But I've always loved history, and so it's kind of a labor of love. But let me tell you just a little bit about North Dakota. First of all, I've had two people up here mention Monticello. We don't have a Monticello in North Dakota. And just for your information, because you're all wondering, Mount Rushmore, that's in South Dakota. Quickly, if I could, North Dakota, let me tell you this. People know very little about it. We do have this. We have prairie fires, drought, tornadoes, blizzards, floods, cattle rustlers. And if for some reason you wake up some morning with a smile on your face, don't worry, that too shall soon disappear. All right, let's take a little video, and then I'll tell you what we've got going on in North Dakota, okay?
North Dakota, a land of contrasts, beautiful vistas in the summer, but brutal 40 below zero winters with harsh north winds. It's a sparse land, a land of grasslands, beautiful badlands, where Theodore Roosevelt ranched as a young man. Fields of wheat and corn that spread for miles, that feed the world. It's home to just 700,000 people and 2 million cattle, 3 cows for every person. It's also a land of deep patriotism, This is home to the Minot and Grand Forks Air Force bases, with hundreds of missiles and bombers. A century ago, when the United States entered World War I, most of those living here were immigrants who wanted to become part of the American dream. 30,000 stepped forward when called. Many who were not yet even citizens began their training at Fort Lincoln in Bismarck.
It's great to be in a place where people celebrate their culture, honor the land, honor the water and the clean air that they breathe, but it's also great to be in a place where a culture honors their warriors. And this centennial, that's what that's all about. You can't correct the past, you can only do the right thing today and make sure that the future doesn't repeat the past. And everyone will be recognized, no matter race, creed, color, gender, or whatever, for the sacrifices that they make for their country.
1,300 of them died in the trenches of Europe. Thousands more returned wounded, suffering with shell shock the rest of their lives. Also among those who volunteered, hundreds of American Indians who had lost everything with the Western settlement. In 1917, they were still not allowed to become American citizens, but they put on the uniform and became warriors once again. Many paid the ultimate price, and some became the first code talkers, using their native language. The recent United Tribes powwow at Old Fort Lincoln in Bismarck honored the brave Indian veterans of World War I.
Our American Indians feel that this is our land, and we view relationship with landscape as our relationship with country. They're inseparable. So when we're fighting to defend our country, we're fighting to defend Makochiki, Machbia, Katkea. This is the land of sky and wind, and this is the land that we're defending.
The North Dakota Historical Society is also highlighting the World War I Centennial by opening new exhibits and starting a project to educate the state's youngsters about the sacrifices made. They've also developed weekly programming to educate about the dramatic events of a century ago. Microsoft has developed a website, and the North Dakota Newspaper Association is working with the North Dakota World War I Centennial Committee to produce a special edition that will be run across the state, detailing World War I, the state's role in it, and listing those who served and died. Activities continue in 2018 with programs in schools and special recognition at the International Peace Garden on the Manitoba-North Dakota border. Here since the 1930s, thousands of acres have been set aside on the longest peaceful border in the world to honor peace between our nations.
The opportunity to share the tragedy of World War I, but also the things that came from it, and the shift in our culture, in our nation, is something that I really, really enjoy.
It's important for me to remember those that fought and died during World War I and honor their legacy, and this for me helps do that.
The North Dakota World War I Centennial Committee, in conjunction with the National World War I Commission, will continue remembering those who paid the ultimate price for freedom and democracy 100 years ago, from the plains of Dakota to the fields of France.
Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about the special newspaper edition, because I'm excited about that. I was in the media for 30 years, and that's what I still do for a living. I make documentaries, and had I seen this, I'd have fixed the sound before it got on the air.
That's on us.
Okay.
It's all on us. It's a digital process or something.
No problem. No problem. Okay. But anyway, and so is your museum. I asked about joining earlier today, as you know, but when I formed the committee, what I did is I went around the state and I picked out 23 college professors, and from various colleges and universities, and I asked each of them to write a particular story, 600 to 800 words about World War I. Picked out various topics. How did we get into it? The Spanish flu epidemic, the Alien Sedition Act, changing the name of the city of Bismarck because it was German, that kind of thing. So we ended up with 23 great stories. I had a guy that edited them all, gave them to the State Historical Society. They put 2 pictures with each story, went to the North Dakota Newspaper Association, laid it on the desk and said, here it is. You can have a special edition for every newspaper in the state because we got Microsoft to go ahead and run the list and break it down by city, by county. In other words, the Napoleon Homestead or the Bismarck Tribune will get a package that lists everybody from their particular area who served in World War I and who died in World War I. It's a special edition with hometown flavor. And just about every newspaper in North Dakota has bought off on that. And that's going to be a big thing for us. 2 things have happened since I've been here. I got a notification last night that the tree program, memorial tree program that we have started working on is taking off. We got a grant for that. And what it is there were thousands of trees that were planted in North Dakota following World War I. And over 100 years, most of those have been lost or forgotten. But at one point, they all had plaques. While we're going back, we're going to identify them, and we're going to put plaques back on them, those that still exist. The website comes up in 2 weeks. Again, Microsoft is doing it for us, and we'll maintain it. Received word yesterday that there's a big event in Bismarck at the Capitol grounds every 4th of July. Next year will be dedicated towards World War I, and they will play the symphony World War I music. And then we're setting up a speakers bureau, and the kids that you saw here from the University of Mary have developed a program utilizing letters to and from mothers and fathers and soldiers, France to the U.S. and vice versa, from World War I. And they got these letters from the State Historical Society. They've developed a great little program, and they're going to take that on the road for us. So one final thing that we're going to do is we're going to encourage every American Legion and every VFW to purchase a flag and do a parade of flags next year, and hopefully then go to the local schools and tell them why their American Legion post or VFW post is named after, like in my hometown, the Omer Zeke post. It was named after a guy from World War I. So, any questions? If not, I'll be around for the rest of the day, and it's fun being here, and I met some great people, and met some of you a year ago in France, as you know, and I noticed the first thing that happened was when they found out I was from North Dakota, they got real nice, you know, and what it was is because I found out 2 weeks later there was no person to head the committee in North Dakota, so thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. We're moving on to the state of Ohio. Ohio has a new representative and a new role. It is Amy Rowe Miller. Amy joins us as the World War I Centennial Commission co-coordinator and the program director for the Ohio History Connections AmeriCorps program through the Ohio History Service Corps. So with that, I'm glad to have Amy with us here in Chicago.
Thank you. Like Susan said, I have been in this role for all of a day and a half, so I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I can't follow that wonderful film presentation, but I am happy to walk you through some of what my predecessor in this role accomplished over the past year. So we did a lot, as you can tell. We created lesson plans. We have a wonderful retired history teacher. He's a former Ohio History Social Studies Teacher of the Year who is working with us to create a series of lesson plans. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to incorporate stories that you don't usually hear about World War I. So he's really focusing on incorporating African American voices, women's voices. So we have 3 of them finished, and we are working on some more. We also had a kickoff event in April to honor the entry of the United States into the war. We have the Ohio History Connection has a doughboy statue out in the front of our building that is the original Ohio World War I State Memorial. So we made that a featured part of our ceremony. There was a speaker, and then we planted one flag for every 1,000 Ohioans who went off to fight in World War I. So there were 263 flags for the 263,000 Ohioans. That same day, we also opened our World War I exhibit at the Ohio History Center. This is a display that shows you all of our wonderful World War I collections. We actually have artifacts from both sides of the conflict, so we put all of that on display. It also features photos from the front line, uniforms, weapons, and there's a section that also focuses on the home front. Like Kentucky, we too participated in the minor league baseball day. We had Commissioner Tom Moe there to throw out the first pitch and tell his story. We had reenactors present. We're lucky we have a bunch of very committed World War I reenactors in Ohio who were willing to come out and do anything we ask to interact with the public. So we had a bunch of them there to bring history to life for the kids. The reenactors were also a part of our March Through Time event, which is an annual event we do to honor Ohioan service in all wars. So we made sure that World War I was part of that. We are most proud of our NEH funded digital project, where we created a union bibliography of all of the World War I collections that are held in Ohio's over 800 historical societies and libraries. We are slowly working on digitizing a portion of those and creating public access to those things. And another part of that coming up in this 2018 year will be working with teachers to create more lesson plans and have teacher workshops to teach them how to use these available resources. Like the rest of you, we also have a bunch of events going on around the state. Okay. We had a training camp in Ohio. Camp Sherman is in Southeast Ohio, and one of my fabulous AmeriCorps members, who is also a World War I reenactor and a World War I historian, took the lead on Camp Sherman Days and partnered with 3 other county historical societies to have a whole day of living history events celebrating the role of Camp Sherman in Ohio's history. We had a Doughboy commemoration up in Northeast Ohio. We did Harding, a presidential site in Ohio, does a presidential symposium every year. And this year they chose to focus on World War I as their topic. And then we too celebrated the great music of World War I. We partnered with Marietta College and the Castle, which is a house museum in Marietta, Ohio, and they put on a fabulous program of World War I music and readings of letters from the time. And so that is what we did this past year. I'm still figuring out what we're going to do in 2018, but hopefully I will be back next year to give you an update. That is it.
Okay, joining us now at the podium is Gerald York, representing the Tennessee Great War Commission.
First of all, I'm not part of the Tennessee Great War Commission. My daughter is one of the 10 commissioners from the state of Tennessee. The governor designated 9 commissioners at the beginning. They realized that Fentress County, where my grandfather was Sergeant York, where he was from, was not represented, so they went out and wanted a 10th commissioner. And so my daughter, actually, the Historical Society came and wanted her to be on the commission. So my daughter is actually the commissioner on the Tennessee Great War Commission. She sends her regrets. Those of you who attended last year, if you've been around my daughter, I'm sure you've met her, and you probably remember her. But she sends her regrets. She didn't realize there was a conflict that she couldn't get out of in Tennessee, so she was not able to come. So yesterday she drafted me she gave me a talk, and then she sent the slides, and I just noticed the slides and the talk are different. So I think she adjusted the slides after she talked to you. So this should be an interesting discussion. First of all, I am proud to represent Tennessee. Tennessee, as you know, is a volunteer state. Some people think it got volunteer state because of World War I. It didn't. It got the volunteer state because of 1812. Notably, one of the heroes, Andrew Jackson, and the Battle of New Orleans. But it continued in that vein. In the Mexican War, they asked for volunteers. They asked for 2,800 volunteers from Tennessee. They got 30,000. So the reputation of being volunteers continued. And then in World War I, Tennessee sent 130,000 men to the war. I want to start off also by thanking Illinois. My daughter and I was at Barrington and at Quincy for the kickoff of their exhibits, for the World War I exhibits. Unfortunately, we had a conflict with Nebraska. I think we're planning on coming next year. But anyway, we want to thank you for the hospitality for that. There's a lot going on in Tennessee. On April the 6th was the kickoff on the Capitol grounds. There's like a memorial park. There's a war memorial building in the area of the state capitol, and that's where the military museum was. But there's also a memorial park now on the other side of the state capitol, and on April the 6th was the kickoff for the World War I Commission and the World War I activities, remembering World War I in Tennessee. Also at the State Museum, they opened an exhibit of World War I. And this is a picture of a bridge. The Tennessee legislature commissioned this bridge. This is a bridge that was right beside my grandfather's home in Pall Mall, Tennessee. The legislature enacted this last year that it would be called the World War I Centennial in honor of World War I and the centennial coming up. And so they actually designated the bridge, and on July 4th, 1941 is when the bridge was actually opened, and they had the dedication. And my grandfather spoke and actually gave a talk, gave a speech. So on July 4th of this year, they had another dedication, and it was dedicated as the World War I Centennial Bridge. This is a picture of some of the folks that attended. And my father, who's actually the oldest living child of my grandfather, he turned 94 in July. My grandfather dresses probably the most patriotic individual you would ever find. The only person I know that has a full Uncle Sam uniform in his closet, dressed up as Uncle Sam, and actually read my grandfather's speech that was the dedication of the bridge in 1941. He read it this July 4th. This was something to commemorate one of the activities that Tennessee did for remembering World War I, and it's going to become, I think, a regular thing. On July 4th, we're going to have a ceremony. There's a state park, Sergeant York Historical Park, there in Pall Mall, of his home, his barn. There's a visitor center. We get a lot of visitors through, and the barn has recently been reconditioned, refurbed, concrete floor, and that's where we have our activities, and that's where we have our Veterans Day program, and that's where we also had the 4th of July. We have, as some of you have, trenches. We have a trench. It's actually on my grandfather's farm. Now, I talk a lot about Pall Mall and the farm there. I'm more familiar with that. But Tennessee has designated the park as the focal point for the celebration of World War I Centennial. Because the Saturday Evening Post picked up my grandfather's story before he ever got back, because of the movie with Gary Cooper. He's probably readily recognized as being a World War I figure. So the state has said the park there in Pall Mall will be the focal point for the World War I Centennial and the celebration. So they have asked, and we have on our website, which is sergeantyork.org, and also I think on the Tennessee website for the Great Commission, they've asked at the state park there if we would have an event every month leading up to November the 18th. And so we have a schedule. I shared it with Terry Hamby here, a schedule of every month something going on at the state park. They're also doing other things besides in Pall Mall. They've had 2 symposiums, one in Nashville and one in Jackson. They have another one that's coming up in Chattanooga of the War Commission, and there's several legacy projects in the works. The one I'm most familiar with is we're redoing the original school building that my grandfather built in the 20s. When he came back from the war, he wanted to bring education back to the community. And I know education is important. So one of the things we're doing is when we're redoing this building, we've already, not in that building because it's not done yet, but we've already hosted down at the park teachers to teach the teachers about World War I and about the importance of World War I. And so this building, we've talked to the Medal of Honor Society about training some of their folks because they have an excellent program that goes out to the schools. And we're looking at, that's one of the things we're going to use this. It's going to be called the Sergeant York Center for Peace and Valor. And it's built, and I think I have a slide later on that, so I'll be quiet and cover it when we get there. But on Veterans Day, we commemorate World War I on Veterans Day, specifically, again at the park there in Pall Mall. We have a trench, we have a German trench, we have an American trench. This last year we had biplanes. When they came, they said, we come, but we have so many requests, we have to spread it out. After spending a weekend there, they said, we'll be back next year and we're bringing more planes. We've had speakers that have come in that said, I've never been to an area that was more patriotic, and the people turned out. Last year we had over 1,000 visitors for Veterans Day. The Veterans Day weekend was 3 days last year. It's going to be 3 days this year. And they're expecting a couple thousand this year, but which quadruples the size of Pall Mall for the weekend. But we did have biplanes. Here's some of the trenches that were built. And also I want to mention at the Frisk Center in Nashville, there is a display, and I think this is the last display, correct? This is the last display before it goes back to England. And I think this is the first time it's been in the States, correct? First time in a while it's been here. And so it's in Nashville until the 21st of January at the Frisk Center. And so that's something that the World War I Commission is in Tennessee is involved in promoting, trying to get folks to come in and see this painting. Signature events, November the 2nd through the 4th. There's a symposium in Chattanooga. You can see the itinerary. This is if you don't know Tennessee, Tennessee's divided up into 3 areas. You have West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and East Tennessee. Tennessee's not very wide, but it's very long. And so it's got 3 different areas. And so they had a meeting in Jackson, which is West Tennessee. They had a meeting in Nashville, which is Middle Tennessee. And the next meeting, the one coming up this November, will be in Chattanooga, which is East Tennessee. And this is on the website, your website as well. This is a calendar of events. I mentioned that they wanted something every month to commemorate World War I and leading up to the centennial of November of 2018. The trenches, you talk about education and you talk about getting kids involved. Trenches are a great way. The young people love the trenches. They love going down into we haven't done the horseradish, but they love going down in the trenches. That's one of the largest attractions when we have our 3-day Veterans Day, is they have the fight between the German trench and the American trench, with smoke, with gunfire, with biplanes flying overhead, with machine guns firing. So it's really a good way to get the kids, the young people involved. And at the school that my grandfather started back in the 20s, it's still going. It's York Agricultural Institute. Their ROTC from the high school has 70 World War I uniforms, and they're coming down and participate in the trench, which is another good way of bringing the young people in. This is a continuing list, and November the 9th through the 11th next year, of course, will be the celebration of the recognition of the 100th anniversary. One of the things that the Commission has done is to add missing names to memorials. There's been a lot of research because of the heightened awareness of World War I, and because of the great work that the World War I Commission has done, to have people go back and start looking at World War I. So they have actually gone through and found names of missing soldiers who were involved in World War I. They found the first soldier that was wounded in France from Tennessee. They're doing a special plaque for him. And so they're going through. And also they identified that Tennessee was one of the largest suppliers of mules that went to France. Any of you who have visited Tennessee, if you go to Columbia, Tennessee, they still have Mule Day. And that was one of the things that they kind of, when they were doing their research on World War I. But this is a school that my grandfather built in the 20s after he came back from the war. We're naming it Sergeant York Center for Peace and Valor. We're trying to instill education-wise to the young people. Personally, I think that's one of the problems we have today with some of the activities that goes on, is the young folks don't know the history. They don't know the values. They don't know what people fought for. They don't know how many people died. So they have the liberties that they have today. And so this center is peace, which my grandfather was always for peace, but also valor. That there are times that there's things that's worth fighting for. This is how the building, artist rendition, we've stabilized the building. This is how it looks now. This is how we hope it's going to look. We would like to do it in the next couple of years. It's a huge project that we're working on, and Susan has helped us with it quite a bit. Most of the information is on the Tennessee Great War Commission website, and also the Sergeant York website, sergeantyork.org. So I would invite you to look at that, and I thank you for the time. Like I said, my daughter did send her regrets about not being able to be here, and we would like for any and all of you to come and see us in Tennessee. and you're welcome anytime. And thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you. My daughter talked a lot about coming and how she loved the area, so it's been nice to be here and visit. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I got news just a little bit ago that unfortunately the representative for the state of Wisconsin was unable to join us. There was an urgent situation that needed to manage. So unfortunately, Michael Tesreau won't be here, and Kevin Hampton did chat in again the regrets on behalf of the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs. What I'd like to do now is they did provide a video. We're going to go ahead and play that, and then I'm going to highlight just a couple things for them. Brad, I don't know if others...
Well, I'm Michael Tesreau. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Veterans Museum, and that's where we are today, 30 West Mifflin on the square. So we're here in our temporary exhibit space gallery, and which currently houses the art of persuasion, mobilizing the masses in World War I. And it takes a look at the effort of the federal government to garner support to get the public behind the war effort, because as you may know, the United States wanted to stay out of World War I, and of course didn't get in until 1917, and so it was a massive government effort that touched every aspect of daily life, newspapers, radio, there were public speaking engagements, everything designed and everything put together to get support for the war.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, no delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to pine, to be proud her boys in line. Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there, over there, over there. Send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there.
I would like to highlight something very special that's happening, and as you saw in the last clip, last section of the video, October 27th through the 28th is a world-class symposium being conducted by not only the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs, but of course the military college that's at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And I would recommend that if anyone has a chance that has a passion for World War I history, that you will travel to Wisconsin and join Commissioner Chair Hamby there at that event. It's going to be phenomenal. So that is one thing I did want to highlight. And Kevin Hampton chatted in. He is. Hi, Kevin. I'm here. I hope I'm doing a good job representing you and Michael. Kevin did let you know that he is here, and if you have any questions, he's an email away to answer any other questions about the symposium or any of the other activities that are going on in the state of Wisconsin. Okay. Thank you. So one of the tenets of the Federal Commission is to educate, and today you saw firsthand the level of educational opportunities made available throughout the states. But this is just a sampling. We know for a fact that there are many other events happening throughout not only these states, but in other states across our country, and we want to hear from you. Please email, call, let me know what you're doing. Let the Commission know so that we can certainly recognize them through the World War I Centennial.org website. And now I'd like to have some concluding remarks from Ken. Would you like to say concluding remarks? Are we good? Just thank you.
It's hard to, it's very unofficial. You guys are doing awesome work all across it. Keep it up. We're going to be there as well, doing it with you in the various ways we're contributing. But what I'm really looking forward to is what we're going to do after this, and that's the town hall, where we're going to actually ask you what it is you think we should be doing as well, because you certainly have a lot of ideas and a lot of good input. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. So I thank you to everybody who put all the work together to report out on what you've done. If we can replicate you across the states, I don't know if we can or not, but it's just wonderful ideas coming out of Kentucky, and it's just a great amount of energy all over your state. And that organization from town to town is just, that's the grassroots things we're talking about. So thank you, everybody, and let's have some lunch.
Absolutely, and thank you to everybody who participated via the live stream. Again, I'm an email, a phone call away, as well as the Commission is there as a resource for you. Thank you so much for your joining us today. Have a good afternoon.